Dauntless Heavy Cruiser reporting.
What's up, MetaNerdz? This video will be a complete breakdown of the luxury yacht turned warship, the Marsheem/Dauntless-class Heavy Cruiser. Looking at its size, complement, armament, and comparing it to other capital ships, seeing how it fought off the Empire and its remnant forces. But first, I want to thank Established Titles for sponsoring this video, and making me a true lord. My Isles ancestors are surely looking on with pride, especially since Established Titles works as a fun way to preserve the natural woodlands of Edelston, Scotland, and restoration efforts all around the world, planting a tree with every order. How it works is that you purchase a title pack for at least 1 square foot of dedicated land, coming with a unique plot number, and works through a Scottish custom where landowners are referred to as lairds, or lords and ladies in English, and so you can use your new title on credit cards, plane tickets, or throw it on your dating profile. You get this neat plaque which even has your own crest, and it makes for a great last minute gift, while keeping these wild areas from being industrialized, and helping global charities like One Tree Planted and Trees of the Future, which honestly is more than a lot of other lords and ladies can brag about. The first 200 people purchasing a title pack using my link will effectively be next to my plot, so we can establish our own little MetaNerdz kingdom. And to make it even better, Established Titles is running a massive Black Friday sale right now, and if you use code MetaNerdz, you get another 10% off on top of that. Go to establishedtitles.com/MetaNerdz to get your gifts now and help support the channel. This heavy cruiser was manufactured by SuroSuub Corporation, the Sullustan megacorp that came to take over this world, with nearly every citizen here working for SuroSuub, securing lucrative Imperial contracts, but also bringing a heavy Imperial presence. They would pump out all sorts of high-tech goods, from comlinks to repair droids, fighters and land speeders, and larger vessels like the luxury 3000 space yacht, Quasar fire carrier, and their largest creation, the Dauntless-class. At a length of around 1,200 meters, or 3/4 of a mile, it was close to a Venator and about half a Secutor. It was around the Venator in height at about 250 meters, and at 350 meters wide, it was about 64% the width of the Republic cruiser. What's really unique about this heavy cruiser is that it was intended to be a luxury vessel that SuroSuub converted into a warship during the Galactic Civil War, and it would actually see frontline combat during several battles after the destruction of the first Death Star. In that year, the Sullustan resistance was finally able to take control of SuroSuub. Since this company controlled all economic action on world, the board of advisors was essentially their government. So when leader of the Sullustan resistance, Sign Tev, became the CEO, he was essentially the global leader. And he would play nice with the Imperial overlords to not draw a planetary invasion, hiding his allegiance to the rebels, making it seem like the takeover of SuroSuub was more like a workers' rebellion, not a general rebellion against the Emperor. Though secretly, he made sure that leaks made it to Mon Mothma, so that movements of ship deliveries could be stolen. A tactic that was practiced by an ever-increasing number of companies the later you went into Imperial reign. This is why the stats of this ship are so odd, as it is essentially a super-yacht or cruise ship turned into a battleship, not purpose-made with Imperial standards like Kuat Driveyard products. These hangars on the side here, and possibly towards the bow, would have been intended for smaller shuttles to travel to your planet-side mansion or favorite spaceport, with room for smaller support vehicles for security and your entourage. But when this was repurposed, this space was able to accommodate 4 starfighter squadrons, or 48 fighters in total, which are said to be various combos of X-Wings, Y-Wings, A-Wings, and B-Wings. Though that number is far less than the ludicrous stats for the Venator, it isn't that far off from the ISD, and could carry more than twice the troops of the Republic's cruiser, with 2 regiments or 5,296 rebels. Even if that is just half the ISD, hopefully those troops would be better rested and with greater morale, with some luxury cabin touches still left over, not the drab industrial gray bunk beds that the bucketheads were sleeping in. Another hint at its luxury yacht origins is this odd fin. It's not a rudder, but similar to these structures on the Providence-class dreadnought, which were packed full of state-of-the-art sensor equipment, allowing it to stay in contact with allies wherever it found itself, providing excellent encryption and holowave comms so that the original owners wouldn't have to miss the big pod race broadcast, and be able to stay private when talking to their tax haven bankers. This was one of the most useful features when the Marsheem was converted into a warship. Another helpful feature already built in were the incredibly powerful reactors and ion engines that you would expect in a luxury vessel of this size, being a nice base to plug in other things like weapon systems and upgraded shielding. Keep in mind that any craft of this size would be durable enough to handle starfighter combat, even when it wasn't meant for war. There was always the threat of pirates, and just building something this large required the structure to be durable enough to survive the chaos of long-distance space travel. Everything from asteroids, solar flares, and diverse and turbulent planetary atmospheres. Think about how a large ship on Earth may be able to survive heavy caliber fire or even some explosions, just by virtue of how it needed to be built to survive the seas. Like this oil tanker that was hit by 3 RPGs and just shrugged it off. And similarly, just like how if some parts were compromised, with water flowing in, you would have measures in place to try and seal and contain that leak. Just like how a civilian space yacht would have the ability to seal off bulkheads to stop an air leak, which of course is what you'd also want to have in a warship. They would add to what would have already been a thick hull, SuroSuub slapping on additional layers of Durasteel armor, and they upped the shield generator power, before packing on a still classified number of turbolasers and ion cannons. Though the number of these weapon emplacements is unknown, we do get a description of, quote, excellent countermeasure systems. So I think it's reasonable to think that it had a similar armament to the MC-80, which also did not rely on missiles or torpedoes for firepower. So around 30 heavy turbolaser batteries, 30 heavy ion cannons, and to make up for the lack of relative starfighter support, I would think less laser cannon batteries and more point defense systems. Perhaps 40 laser cannon batteries and 60 point defense, since those would require less energy, and even the Venator with its huge complement of starfighters still had 64 PDLCs. Though it does seem to lack one of my favorite features of a ship, the tractor beam projectors. It probably had something minimal for moving small debris and guiding ships to dock, but nothing military grade as they are not listed. Their first reported use on a battlefront was in the service of the Ishitid Planetary Defense Fleet. The Kalikidan, a spiritual leader and head of these people, decided to join the rebels after Luke and Leia personally traveled to T'Brin in order to plead the case for a unified alliance. They posed as diplomats from Naboo's House Barenko, under the guise of talking trade deals, but Luke was captured and brought aboard the ISD, the Stormbringer. Leia was able to save him, but under a hail of blaster fire, they were able to sneak into an escape pod and fire off away from the ship, but were helpless and just moments away from a free space cremation when the T'Brin Navy intervened. 3 Marsheem-class Heavy Cruisers were sent on the direct orders of the Kalikadin to save his new off-world friends, and they quickly raced out from behind the dark side of T'Brin's moon, unloading on the ISD before it was able to get its shields up. The mile-long Kuat craft was melted through by the heavy turbolaser cannons, before these rounds struck some critical systems like fuel reserves, weapon systems, or the reactor, causing a massive chain reaction that vaporized the 10,000 plus lives on board, without the Marsheem trio suffering any damage. With this quick closing speed and ability to rapidly deliver overwhelming fire, makes it a real shame that we don't see it in action more often, and we just get vague mentions of frontline use. And the fact that T'Brin was even allowed to retain a navy was proof of more of the Empire's close allies. These worlds seen as so obedient they were taken for granted, like SuroSuub, were the ones that provided the greatest threat to Imperial rule after the Battle of Yavin, when Mon Mothma was able to prove her idea of a rebel alliance that could deliver an unthinkable victory, exposing that the Empire was building a planet-killer battle station, and that if there was ever a time to fight back, it was now. After the Battle of Andor, these Dauntless-slash-Machine ships would help keep the Imperial remnant on the run, a mission objective that never seemed to be truly completed. By 13 ABY, the New Republic Defense Fleet deployed a single Dauntless named Andor to patrol near a remote planetoid RZ7-6113-23. In the bridge, we see that its design was unlike those of Kuat or Mon Cala, with a sleek, open, 3-level design, having a command pit and second story with viewing windows, while all the data from those complex sensor arrays were displayed on these screens, allowing them to pick up on a single TIE SR, or Scout variant, which did have a hyperdrive, but was so far out in the middle of nowhere that the captain of the Andor suspected that a mothership or base must be hidden nearby. As they pursued at a distance, they saw the craft accelerate towards the planetoid, which the sensors were still saying was completely devoid of life. But a tech does shout out that he found a large energy presence on the surface. This must be the base, and the captain starts to think how foolish it was for the TIE to fly into its sensor range, and then immediately run home to give up the hidden base. But in a split second, he realizes that he was the fool. Ordering an immediate reverse, a text says that they were now being targeted, and he realizes it was a trap. A single massive bolt is fired by a gun that seems to be on a scale of a V-150 Planet Defender, like seen on Hoth, but instead of an ion blast, this odd Imperial Remnant cannon was a capital ship killer. And just as those Marsheem had once taken out an ISD before it could get its shields up, now this Dauntless was hopeless. The bridge crew spent their last few seconds watching this fireball race towards them, a direct hit to the bow that set off a chain reaction that consumed the Andor. These Imperial holdouts called themselves the Restored Empire, and this Dauntless was just an early casualty in their war to destroy the New Republic and unify the Imperial Remnant forces. While the final use of this ship was at least as late as 29 ABY, where almost every available ship was pressed into service to defend the galaxy from the invading Yuuzhan Vong. So that's it for its history and breakdown. As for behind the scenes facts, the background of this ship seems to be based on the timeless tradition of converting merchant ships into warships. which is pretty straightforward as you can always add weaponry, and anything can act as a troop carrier if you want it to. A practice that is probably as early as warfare itself, stretching back to the ancient world, and some of the most notable examples being the English fleet that fought off the Spanish Armada, and in World War II with civilian craft on all sides being converted at different stages of the war. The Dauntless-class was first introduced in the PC game Star Wars Rebellion in 1998, and expanded on in the comic Crimson Empire 3: Empire Lost 1, as well as the New Jedi Order sourcebook, while it was brought into canon and synchronized with the Marsheem-class Heavy Cruiser in Star Wars Adventures 2017 Issue 5. If you made it this far, please hit that like button, leave a comment on any thoughts or suggestions for future videos, subscribe if you want to see more, and check out our membership. There's tons of other ships in this playlist, but most important of all, remember, if you can invent an always-on shield generator, you'll be the richest person in the galaxy. And the Force will be with you, always.